Good morning, I'm Stephen Edholm from skillcult.com. Today we're talking about wood chips. What do you do with them? Isn't it wasteful to make all these wood chips with an axe when I could use a saw instead? How long does it take to pick them up? Should we pick them up at all? What about context? So many questions and more answered today on Skill Cult. Fancy transition. No, seriously, I get this question all the time. What do you do with the chips? / isn't that wasteful? / shouldn't you use a saw? First, I'm just going to pick these wood chips up and we're going to see how long it takes. I'm just going to go at my normal pace and pick up the ones that I would pick up. Here's our pile. As you can see, it is quite a bit of wood. I mean, I would say there's probably 2 good fireplace logs in here. You know, medium-sized ones, regular kind of stuff I would put in my wood stove. So it is quite a bit. Took 3.5 minutes to pick this up. This probably represents 80% at least of, probably more, but at least 80% of the wood that came out of the cuts. Now, obviously, if you're making a V cut in a piece of wood, the first few chips, if they're large, like they should be, represent most of the wood. I mean, look at this. This represents at least 60% of the wood that came out of this one cut. I mean, this one is particularly large, but in normal circumstances, well, there's another one. I would say, yeah, I picked up stuff as small as this if it was easy. I was kind of shooting for 2 inches and up. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is context, because waste is contextual. My context is I live in a county that's extremely overgrown with biomass. I know very few people who've taken the time to really improve and clear up and thin their forests out and improve them and make them healthier. The whole county was cut pretty recently in terms of, you know, forest time. Like this property was probably cut about 60 years ago. And it's still regrowing. It's regrowing in a very chaotic manner, and there's a lot of crowded trees, there's a lot of sick trees. Biomass is one of the biggest resources that we have. Not only is it not detrimental to cut down trees, it's actually a good idea. Now, if you were to live in an area that was heavily deforested, where people use wood for fuel, to cut this up and leave it on the ground might seem wasteful, because that would mean that those people would have to go cut more green trees, which are scarce. And you see where I'm going with that. So always think in context, and you know, before you judge people for what they're doing, you might want to just ask them a few questions about what's going on and in their environment and why they're cutting and what they're cutting and what resources are available to them. Because if I thinned out still more than half the trees on my property, and I'm talking about everything from saplings up to big trees, I could improve the health of the forest in general. It would be more productive, it would produce more wildlife food, healthier, longer-lived trees, etc., and so on. So when you look at it that way, it's not wasteful at all for me to leave these chips. Also, this is made from what trees grow from. Now, most of it is still going to be carbon, which just comes out of the air, and there's plenty of that. But also what's important is all the minerals. So if I burn this to ash, the carbon's all gone, unless I make charcoal. But if I burn it all the way to white ash, but there's a whole lot of minerals remaining, and that's what, you know, trees are really made of. The important stuff besides carbon and water and sunlight that trees are made of. So for me to just continually cut and haul everything out of the woods, you could see that as actually detrimental. So in a way, it's good to leave some stuff behind. That could be the limbs, it could be the chips, it could be the bark, whatever. Or not. It's a resilient system. You know, if I'm not just cutting everything and pulling everything out all the time, that's fine. And the trees and soil life and microbes are constantly unlocking new nutrients from the subsoil and the rock and stuff that's decaying, all the minerals that are decaying underground. But that is a slow process, and nutrients very, very definitely do cycle in the system. And to just continually haul everything out isn't necessarily the greatest idea ever. I like to use most of my chips, the big ones, but I it's almost, I could definitely make an argument that it's better for me to just leave them in the forest. Okay, what can we do with these chips? So obviously you can just burn them. I mean, these make outstanding kindling. You throw a good double handful of these when you start your fire, and they have lots of surface area. They have ragged cut surface area, which catches and burns really easy. You know, like this has a bunch of thin edges. which burns much quicker. It catches and burns more rapidly than, say, just like a round stick. Like anytime you split wood, those sharp edges catch fire easier than round edges. So another good use for these is making charcoal. Now, if you have big, heavy chunks, then you could feasibly make charcoal for things like blacksmithing and cooking and smelting metals and stuff like that, those kind of industrial uses. But making this into charcoal for soil improvement, often termed biochar, is really easy. So one way you can do it is just to do it in the pit method that I have a couple of videos on, at least one video on. That's just a hole in the ground, you start a fire, you put on a layer of fuel. These would be great. You know, chips up to about this big would be great. Let it burn down to coals, add another layer, let it burn to coals, add another layer, and eventually you end up with a big pile of charcoal in your pit, and you spray it with a hose to put it out, and that's it. Another really cool way to do that, which I think these would be just perfect for, it was posted by a viewer, and that is the system that Edible Acres, YouTube channel Edible Acres, uses. So what they do is they have these big stainless rectangular trays. They're like food service trays with lids, and they start a fire in the wood stove and slip one of those in there, and it heats up the wood. It's basically a retort, like a charcoal retort. So it heats up the wood inside the tray, but not enough oxygen gets in there to burn the wood up. So it chars and it turns to charcoal, but it releases gases which escape out of the lid. They burn, the gases burn in the wood stove, contributing to the heating of the house. And then after a while, you can just take that out and let it extinguish itself with the lid on it, and replace it with another tray. So I think he said he could make up to about, they make sometimes 5 gallons a day, if I remember correctly. Just go check it out. It's a pretty cool method, and I think this is just like really the most ideal feedstock for that method. So Tim Springston at Oxbow Farms is using his wood chips from doing the cordwood challenge, which is where I challenge people to cut a cord of wood with an axe, and he did that this year. Made a lot of wood chips, and he's been using them to grow mushrooms. He's growing King storpharia, which is a large mushroom that likes to grow in wood chip beds. You just build a deep, chip bed and inoculate it with these mushrooms. Obviously, you can just use it as mulch too. Anyway, there's plenty of uses for these on a homestead or in a yard. Anyone that has soil and grows things and has a yard, there's no shortage of uses for these, and any failure to use them is just, it's either a failure of creativity or initiative on our part, because any piece of wood that you ever see anywhere should be viewed as a potential resource, and this is no exception. That being said, because of context, as I discussed earlier, I don't always pick up my wood chips. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I probably have 10 sites around here that I could take 2 buckets to and fill up 2 buckets and carry them home. Some of them I will, some of them I probably won't. Again, I could easily make an argument that it's better to just leave them in the woods and let them rot. And I don't think, again, that it's a big deal that I want to use them. If I use them, I use them. Either way, it's all good. And I hope that answers your burning questions about wood chips. Next video on axes will be my wood splitting video, which you better get to soon before those rounds dry out, because they're just going to get harder and harder to split. Maybe that's what I'll be doing today. The chickens have followed me all the way. There's a chicken behind the camera. It's headed this way. Followed me all the way up here in the woods. Bad. That's bad for chickens to come up in the woods. They're completely defenseless.